All right, so we'll go ahead and get us started. So good morning, everyone. My name is Jamie Faust, and I'm the Global Alliance Manager for Couchbase's Partnership. And thank you so much for joining us today for a conversation about data democratization and data maturity in organizations with Couchbase West. So I'll start us off by leading in with some introductions for today's speakers. And first up is David Scheck-Snyder, who's a solutions architect with more than 20 years of industry experience, as well as a concentration in design and deployment of Linux and open source solutions. David specializes in Linux enterprise solutions, high performance computing clusters, data analytics, big data analytics clusters, and high performance distributed databases. And next up is Danny Sandwell, who is an IT industry veteran who's focused on maximizing value from data for more than 30 years, both as a solutions marketing manager at Quest, where he's responsible for communicating the capabilities, use cases, and business value of Quest's data empowerment solutions, and with the Erwin brand, where he's worked in consulting, solutions architecture, product, business development, as well as strategy roles. And Danny enjoys engaging with customers across various industries as they plan, develop, and govern and deliver their enterprise data architectures and assets. So today, Danny and David are going to introduce the concept of data democratization in organizations. They're going to discuss Couchbase's role, and then introduce and discuss data maturity and how Erwin Data Modeler fits in. And we'll wrap it up with a summary and a Q&A. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Danny Sandwell.
Thanks, Jamie. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of data democratization. And I think the way to do that is let's talk about data first. And if you're not in the world that data is really important and becoming even more important all the time, you might be on the wrong webcast, but stick around. Maybe we can help you as well. But yeah, what we're finding, and we deal with a lot of customers at Quest, and as Jamie mentioned, we have a set of solutions called data empowerment. So we're talking to organizations about all aspects of their data and really how they can get more out of their data, get more ROI for the money that they're spending to get the insights. But really, that's the key to it. The data is an important asset because it is the fuel for actionable insights. And organizations are recognizing that. They recognize that it's their most significant competitive advantage if they do the right thing around data. And they also know that it's the biggest threat to their company because their competitors are doing the same thing. And what we're seeing is a lot of organizations putting money into advanced analytics and really trying to find better ways and better mousetraps to get more out of that data. But on the other side of that coin, we're also seeing that they're still struggling with the actual data itself. And that all of those investments that they're making in, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and other approaches to analytics is being put at risk because of the time and the latency that's occurring, just trying to get their data ready and fit for use for the reasons that they do want to use it. And alongside that, a lot of the data that's in the organization, because they don't have visibility and awareness of all of the data that they have, that it's not being used in this way. And that's really a risk for organizations. So, just looking at some of the things that are going on out in the world, there's this idea of data democratization. And we'll talk a little bit more in the next slide what that is. But we're really seeing, folks, up their budgets in terms of digital technologies, IT spending. But what they're realizing is that there's still a huge risk to the money that they're putting in there if they don't take the right approach to making sure they have, a modern approach to governance around their data and the analytics that are consuming that. But at the same time, if they can mature those processes, IDC sees, strong evidence out there that organizations that increase the maturity of their data capability in the organization are really seeing the results in overall business outcomes. But then again, on the other side, there's the strong evidence that there's still a long way to go in organizations to change the culture in terms of how they view data, how they view insights that come from data, and how they make their decisions, vis-a-vis data or their experience and gut instinct, and all of these things are really important in order to be successful. And to be successful, they really need to look at this concept of data democratization seriously and start to address these pieces. So there's really four major components to data democratization, but at its very core, it's about putting data into the hands of anyone in the organization that can have that positive impact that organizations are looking for. So making sure that they have access, and access that is, controlled, protected, but also enables them to get to the data that they need without a whole lot of roadblocks and without having to wait for others in the organization to enable them to do that. They need to trust the data. They need to understand it. They need to know how it relates to the business. They have to know how it relates to other data and what those interactions are between those data sets, so that they can really do a great job of ideating on what their data can do for them. And once they do that, actually trust that the results that they're getting are appropriate. Capability, the ability to take that data and put it into multiple different forms and do the things that they need around that data is one of the other pieces. And then finally, that culture word comes back up, because all of the rest will be for naught if people don't use it and people don't embrace that. And really, this is where we start to come together around the idea of Couchbase and Erwin data model, or by Quest, really providing a platform for this democratization, because Couchbase is going to give you that access and capability. Erwin Data Modeler is going to really go a long way to enable that trust in data. And the three of those together will slowly and surely change that culture, because as people start to see the success and the results they get from that data because of this capability, they will be much more inclined to embrace that moving forward. Now, what do you get out of the data democratization? Like I said, it's about putting data in the hands of employees. So it's really empower employees to understand and find new ways to leverage data for the good of the business. Allow them to feel better about the decisions that they're making, because they understand the foundation of those decisions. They're going to increase the ROI on the investment in data analytics across their organization, because again, something doesn't pay off until it's actually used. They're going to drive in and be able to build those improved customer insights, and really at the end of the day, become much more agile and adaptable in the way they approach their business and how they go forward in terms of planning the next steps for today, tomorrow, and the day after that, because they've set up a foundation where they have that visibility, awareness, capability, and access that allows them to put data where they need it to be, when they need it, in a form that it's going to be useful and usable. And, just to sort of finish this off, there is still a huge gap in that trust in data, and thus the reason why there's that huge gap in the culture. So what organizations really see as the critical components for building trust is this explainability and transparency. Are you able to go into a meeting, show the results, and when asked the questions, be able to give those proper answers that are going to show that the data that you use was fit for use? And unfortunately, a high percentage of organizations are just not there yet, because they have not attained the maturity that they need in order to provide that for the different stakeholders in their organization. So at this point, I think I'm going to turn it back to David, and he's going to take a look at the role of Couchbase really as the foundation and that key component that's going to put data in the hands of organizations in the way that they need it, with the adaptability and agility that's required for today's business.
Oh, thank you, Danny. Well, let's talk about what NoSQL is first. NoSQL refers to databases which lacks SQL or do not use a relational model. Once the SQL language or transactions became optional, a flurry of databases were created using distinct approaches for common use cases. Key value simply provided quick access to data for a given key. Popular examples include Couchbase, DynamoDB, and CosmosDB. Wide column databases can store a large number of arbitrary columns in each row. Popular examples there include Cassandra, HBase, and CosmosDB. Graph databases store data and relationships as first-class concept. Now, document databases aggregate data into a hierarchical structure with JSON as a means to an end. Document databases provide flexible schema, built-in data types, a rich structure, and implicit relationships using JSON. We see many offerings supporting multiple data models, with Couchbase supporting key value and document models. You can also model relational data in Couchbase, as we will discuss in upcoming slides. So if NoSQL databases don't have tables, what do they have? This can vary, but oftentimes you'll see a collection, as with Couchbase, MongoDB, and Cosmos. Collections may belong to something like a scope, the next level up in Couchbase. And then the scopes belong to another level up. In Couchbase, that would be a bucket. Data organization can have an impact beyond data modeling, including access control, queries, indexes, multi-tenancy, and replication, with each configured at the bucket, scope, or collection level. Well, so here's a translation guide from relational to NoSQL. It doesn't mean that these are the same things, but it may help you to understand the organization level of the various terms. A server in the relational world becomes a cluster in Couchbase. A database in the relational world becomes a bucket in Couchbase. Schema becomes a scope. Tables become collections. Rows become documents. And finally, a primary key becomes a document key. So, I'm not here to tell you that JSON data modeling is superior to relational. There's trade-offs. The relational model requires normalization, requires alter, and there are many benefits to this. But the trade-offs are that it's difficult. Note, I didn't say impossible, but difficult to get these four things: availability, performance, scalability, and flexibility. And with a JSON database, you can still have normalization if you choose, but it's relaxed. In other words, not enforced by the database. So what we want to accomplish with data modeling is, number one, optimize the model based on access patterns, not a third normal form relational structure. We want to be flexible, have the ability to respond to change, one of the tenets of being agile. And we want it to be clustered / scalable, which is not impossible with relational, but certainly very challenging. So let's go through an example. Relational on the left, document on the right. And we already have some decisions to make. So if you aren't comfortable making decisions, JSON modeling might not be for you. But remember, unlike relational, decisions are more easily reversed. Okay, let's bring in a second table, usually done with foreign keys. A single customer consists of 3 rows across 2 tables, so you'll need joins. In a JSON model, one way we can model this is to embed billing data into an array so it remains a single document. If you have a use case where your data access consists of querying customer joined with billing, and maybe there's an object relational mapping involved, and that happens a lot. This will lead to better performance. Finally, let's bring in orders, details, and products. In the JSON database, there can be customers collection, a products collection, and an orders collection. And again, back to decision time. Do you want to embed those orders details to an orders document? Could it be could better performances could be better performance as well as more flexibility? For example, does every order have a quantity? I'm going to go through a few more examples later to try and help you understand the trade-offs and decisions, but data modeling is all about trade-offs. consolidating data into a single document means the data can get bigger. Atomicity. If you consolidate, you have less of a need of ACID transaction. If you don't or can't, transactions are basically overhead, especially in a distributed cluster. Complexity, more normalization, more collections. Small collections can have great indexing benefits. And finally, speed. The document size is one factor you would want to optimize for access patterns. A little bit more later on. So for NoSQL databases, a single document is limited. Currently, Cosmos DB is limited at 2 megabytes, possibly more if you're using a different API. Mongo is 16 and Couchbase is 20. The point isn't the actual cap. It's that large consolidated documents have trade-offs. If the size proves to be a bottleneck, then basically just break them up. And speaking of breaking them up, another decision exists when it comes to relationships. That's embed versus refer. In the relational world, it's always refer. Foreign keys, separate tables. In the JSON database world, you can choose. Here are some tips to help you decide which way to go. For each of these, not all may apply to every situation, but generally, embed when A owns B. In other words, A plus B are often accessed together, mostly reads, and the combined data is relatively small. As a general rule, refer when A is related but doesn't own B. Both documents are often accessed separately. There are often writes or document size needs to be reduced. Our recommendation is generally, if you're in doubt, try embed consolidate first. So here's a model to demonstrate some of the relationships you'll need to think about. One-to-one, in this case, it's always embedded. One-to-many, it's also embedded. This might cause an issue if a mission would involve multiple satellites, but there was a decision made that with this model that all satellites own missions, so you have that relationship. Or many-to-many. It definitely makes sense to have these separate instruments could measure multiple satellites, and satellites are measured by multiple instruments. And like in the relational world, there's a many-to-many collection of measurements that link them. Now, with that said, there are many decisions and trade-offs to consider building a NoSQL document data model. This is where a tool such as Erwin Data Modeler comes into play. Erwin provides the ability to build and version multiple data models and assist with decisions as completely normalize your data, completely denormalize your data, or in most cases, a mixture of the two. I will now turn things back over to my colleague Danny to discuss data maturity.
Thanks, David. So this concept of data maturity and again, it's a fairly large ball of twine, if you will, but there's some basic concepts to it, which is really increasing the ability to not only have the data and serve the data that you want, but to make sure that you have your arms around understanding that both from its relationship to the business as well as the relationship to the technology and infrastructure and processes that support that, to really become much more repeatable, much more agile, in terms of the way that we take this, so that when something new comes to the organization, it's not sort of starting from scratch. It's not figuring out and breaking a whole lot of stuff and then fixing it. It's really being able to identify how, where, and why you want to put it in the way that you do that, and then enable that to be, pushed back out to all of the stakeholders that care about that, in terms of really understanding that and bringing down the level of delay and latency that exists when trying to get new data out to the organization, and really being able to respond to whatever situation is there without impacting the business, or impacting the business as minimally as as possible. So this is something that you do, and data modeling is an aspect of that, and that's what we're going to focus on today. You can look at the same around how you set up your data office, your governance policies, and apply those things. How you set up potentially marketplaces for your data to allow your stakeholders to come in and really have a self-service experience in terms of increasing their own data literacy and really accelerating their ability to get their hands on that data for the purpose that they want it for. Now, when we look at data modeling and how that fits into maturity, one of the things I really like to talk about is the fact that data modeling is much more than database design, right? Data modeling at its very core is about articulating a structure of data in the way that a human person would understand and respond to that. So we have things, we have descriptions about things, and then we have relationships between those things. Now that sounds like relational, it sounds like normalized, but it's not really, because again, it doesn't matter where you are on that normalization, denormalization scale, those things are still going to exist, as we saw from the elements that David brought to the conversation. But there's so much that gets captured in a data model, and those data models have multiple views to enable this, so that it becomes that single thing that becomes the glue between all the folks on the IT side that are going to be standing up the technology to store this data, the folks on the application development side that are actually writing to these data structures and building applications to serve the business. For the folks that are integrating data, understanding how these different elements of data are the same and how they're different. For folks that are looking at trust in data, where does this data come from? What are the how does this data get here, and what happened to it on the way? What is the nature of this data? Is it sensitive data? Do I need to be worried about it? Is it aligned with a specific compliance requirement like GDPR or CCPA or HIPAA or any of those things? Then you're bringing in all of those technical requirements, business requirements, things like tribal knowledge, the folks what we've learned about our organization and its data, the semantics that are common across the board in our industry, so that we can fit better into the ecosystem that we work, as well as our own design standards that have been there to make sure that our data is complete and that it has a consistency that's going to allow you to work with it much more effectively at less cost and all of those good things. All of that happens within the data modeling tool, and in that interaction between conceptual and logical models and physical models. And when we look at the nature of these models, they have different purposes and different audiences. So when you think about it, the data model speaks to everyone in the organization, whether it's senior management, whether it's data-focused people, whether it's technology-focused people, or people who are focused on grabbing that data and delivering it. You're talking to them in their own language, and now you're allowing them to collaborate around this and bring their secret sauce into the mix as well. So all of these models are supported, if you have the right modeling tool, or Erwin Data Modeler by Quest, within that tool. And then the information within that really goes and performs as the single source of truth around that data, the systems that are related to that data, and how it serves the business. So it becomes a very, very powerful element, not just for taking new data requirements and turning them into useful and usable data sources within your organization, but also as a mechanism to communicate that out for everybody to understand exactly what they have, how it relates to everything else around it, and what it really means to the problem that they're trying to solve for the organization. So this takes it to, Erwin Data Modeler, because again, data models don't require a data modeling tool. I started out doing my data models on the back of a napkin. I have a whole, document box full of napkins in case I ever need to reuse them, but I do find that they're tough to reuse that way. So this is where you really get into bringing in an enterprise class tool to mature that environment around Couchbase. So Couchbase gives you that foundation and starts to mature, as we saw, your ability to take all sorts of different data and use it effectively, store it effectively in the most cost-effective, as well as technology effective or performance effective way. And then this next layer around becomes the data modeler, which allows you to understand the data that you have today, manipulate those structures in a way that's going to serve the business, and then forward engineer those things out. So it brings a lot of automation, saving a lot of hand coding time. It has a lot of different views all within one tool. It allows you to do things like set standards and then leverage and enforce those standards as you deploy new things out, anything from naming to how you have your dates configured, all of those things, which then is going to help you with your downstream integration costs. And then, the data modeling tool also allows you to provide an environment to start collaborating together to become much more agile and efficient moving forward. So let's kind of just dig into some of those areas. And I think I've kind of covered this one as I normally do. I speak to my next slide in my own head. But really, there's a lot of aspects to it. It's about speed, agility. It's about interacting with the other folks and the processes that are out there in the organization, as well as making sure that when we present our data to our business, that it is consistent, that it's understandable, and that they can become smarter in how to use that. So, first thing, we support these hybrid database designs. We started out as the relational data modeler of choice. We are still that, and recognized early as we saw the power of platforms like Couchbase that there was a role for data modeling around NoSQL. And David did a great job talking about the differences between these, relational design being, focused on what we store, whereas NoSQL is really more about how we access and really providing that performance so that you can get into these sort of real-time analytics and response interactions with your customers that really were quite difficult to do in the more traditional databases. But the reality is that they work best together, because a JSON document is excellent in terms of what is actually deployed out there. For people that are querying that, they want to see that structure, that they want to understand it. But when you're talking to a senior business person or somebody who may be, looking at new data requirements, you still need that relational model. So having an environment where you can have both of these living together, connected, and actually manage the interaction between those models is very, very powerful in terms of really driving out, value in terms of how the business sees its data and how you actually deliver that to the organization. So very, very important to have these two things together. At the very foundation, I'm sure you have legacy systems that are sitting out on those traditional databases. Data modeler becomes the foundation and a key sort of element for that heavy lift of taking something that's been deployed on Oracle or SQL Server, any of those platforms, and getting them ready to be deployed on Couchbase. So we'll document using our reverse engineer. We'll retarget to Couchbase so that we start to use Couchbase data types, constructs, and things like that. We will support in the denormalization of that model to the appropriate level that's required. And then we will provide the actual code that's going to deploy those structures out to Couchbase. Very powerful in terms of accelerating that migration. You saw David talk about all of the different types of elements that are in the Couchbase model, if you will, and we support those capabilities and have for a number of years. So very strong in terms of taking our relational foundation and rebuilding that and making sure that it's appropriate for these new modern database platforms, giving you that ability to define and document all of those things within the model. And then, once that's done, you're going to have flexible forward engineering to actually, push those JSON documents and collections and all of those elements out into the Couchbase environment using our forward engineering automation. You may already have deployed data out to Couchbase. I'm assuming you have. I would hope that you have. But you also need to then communicate that back to the organization as part of this overarching democratization and maturity model that you're trying to build in your organization. So again, just like we can with any other data structure, we can go in and reverse engineer what exists in Couchbase, bring that in, not the data itself, but the structures. And we do that by sampling the data that's out there in Couchbase and bringing that into the visual model, where you can then, do things like classify sensitive data, put descriptions behind that may not be out there in the Couchbase catalog so that people can have a deeper understanding of what's going on. And then even derive a relational model from that if that's something that you need to do in order to speak to the different constituencies in your organization. If you have design standards, you can actually reverse engineer, apply those standards, and probably a good time to, thinking I'm on a different platform, getting to a very, very strong capability that we have, which is it's called Complete Compare, but this is where you can compare and sync both models to databases, and actually databases to databases. So basically at a very detailed level with your full control, you can identify the differences, document differences that you want to remain, and then actually, remediate those differences if you want one to sync up to the other, and then communicate those changes out, but even more importantly, actually generate. And I'm showing my old relational background here, David, so I do apologize. I'm using the term alters in a more generalized sense, in terms of bringing back the things that need to change on your database platform based on what you have in the model. So very powerful capability there. On top of that, we provide a modeling repository where all of these standards and all of these models get stored centrally. So now instead of having one person working on a model and another person waiting for them to finish, they can actually start to check in and check out models using only the models that they're allowed to have access to. So you can apply access permission management against that. But now you're capturing every change to the model, who did what, when, and why. Folks can start to work on those models collaboratively and use this centralized facility to, manage any conflicts that come through that concurrent modeling. This becomes the place where you can actually embed your standards and make them live. So now if you've applied some design standards to a specific model, and those design standards are changed and updated in this environment, those changes get pushed out for acceptance into the models that they're actually bound to, which again, speeds up the process. So active standards management, and then the ability to look at overarching what data do you have in what platforms, and be able to understand those models and how they relate to each other. So it's version management, it's governance of the modeling process, it's standards, and it's really allowing folks to work together much more effectively. In fact, another month or so, we're going to have a really good, easily accessible portal that's going to be there for your business users to start accessing those models, collaborating, making comments. They're not going to change the models, but they're going to bring their tribal knowledge and their special sauce into the process again, so that you can build a better mousetrap on Couchbase and be much more effective. Third-party models, this shouldn't be discounted. One of the benefits of being the leader for as long as we have in the data modeling space is that anyone who's sort of building third-party models, whether they're vertically oriented or the Microsoft common data model, which looks at the entire enterprise, they publish this in an Erwin format, which means now you can bring that into your Erwin environment and actually apply that to the different data sources that you've deployed in Couchbase. So, really really standardizing not just how you deploy, but standardizing on how you talk about data in your organization, which is very, very good for the business folks in your organization. It's also very powerful as you start to branch out and your data becomes part of an ecosystem, if you choose to go that way, and if that's the business that you're in, so that again, there's standards across that, so that when we're talking apples, we're all talking apples, not apples and oranges. Finally, data governance. Quest has a strong capability, a product called Erwin Data Intelligence, and in part and parcel with the metadata that we bring into that to then apply our flexible governance model on, we can bring our Erwin data models in and then start to bring it into a much wider audience with a wide range of data intelligence. Again, very, very powerful in terms of automating the collection and then putting that up into a marketplace so that organizations can really go in and self-service, shop the data, understand who owns the data, all of those good things. And your Couchbase data becomes part of that as those data models are brought in. And again, we automate the sort of ongoing synchronization of what exists in our working modeling repository and what sits in that data intelligence repository. All of these are steps that are going to drive you much closer to data maturity and really improve the ROI that you're going to get out of that Couchbase platform that you've invested in, because you're going to be able to get there quicker, under much more control, with much more visibility and explainability behind it, which means you're going to not only enable agility and adaptability in how you store and deliver data to your organization, but you're also going to inadvertently increase the thirst for data within your organization. And that thirst for data really goes back to that culture conversation in terms of moving data from being something that people consider as they make their decisions and to that level where it is something that they demand to make their decisions. And that's when you really start to see the ROI on both your analytics investments as well as the investments that you make on creating a much more mature data foundation to deliver that from. So I think where we're going next is the summary, which is good. It's going to give us some good time for questions. Better together, absolutely. If you're looking to achieve that data maturity and democratize your data in a sustainable way, meaning that the efforts that you're going to undertake and invest in are going to serve the business today, but are also going to be able to grow with the business and the data that your business requires moving forward. The combination of Couchbase and Erwin Data Modeler by Quest, I don't want to use the no-brainer side because, but it is a very, very strong value proposition. Couchbase, taking getting rid of all of the constraints of a lot of database technology and giving you that flexibility in the data model so that you can bring the data that you really need for your organization and manage it and deliver it effectively with real scalability and performance, meaning, you're kind of paying for what you need, but you're ready to go and you don't have to, basically kick over the table and start again when those workloads get larger and the demands on those workloads get much larger, and really enabling an environment where real-time analytics is a reality in your organization and not just an aspiration. And then when you bring that in with, the ability to communicate this in a visual model, document both the technical aspects, but the business aspects of this data, apply some governance and ensure that you're not doing anything to take yourself out of compliance and put your organization at risk, and really provide an environment where all of the citizens in your organization can start to participate, collaborate in bringing data together for the betterment of the business. When you put those things together, I think it's a very, very powerful value proposition for the organization, and absolutely a way to set yourself up for success, not just in today's business environment, really set yourself up for success for whatever that business environment is going to be moving into the future. David, anything you want to add to this? I try to do Couchbase. It's due, but you're the man that knows even much better than I do in terms of the impact that you guys have.
And Couchbase offering it's a distributed shared nothing high performance NoSQL database. We talked a lot about the data modeling and everything else, but we have all of the availability that people would expect from an enterprise database, and high performance through all of the multiple components that you may need on top of that, but offering a very flexible data model as well as a SQL programming language that you can already translate existing skills over to use has made the product very accessible to a wide number of enterprises.
Yeah, I think that SQL move was absolutely brilliant, because there's a lot of those skills, especially as you move farther away from IT and sort of the pure technical people. Those skills are there. So really bridging that gap, I think, was massive in terms of delivering, the promise of what Couchbase can bring.
Yeah, definitely industry standard foundational skills that most organizations have, and all we really need to do is figure out how to traverse a little bit of JSON, and existing queries poured over very easily. Yep.
Hey, an old SQL guy like me, if I can do it, anyone can do it. Thanks. I guess at this point, Jamie, I think if we have questions, we can get to those questions. I'm sorry, Jamie, if I'm putting you on the spot. I'm usually they read the questions. I can read the questions too, but
yeah, not a problem, Danny. Thanks for handing it back over. I think the first question we have is: does Erwin Data Modeler work with Couchbase Capella?
And I can take that, Jamie. And for our audience, Couchbase Capella is Couchbase's fully managed database as a service, which we launched a couple of years ago. We launched with Quest Erwin Data Modeler as a launch partner. So there was a lot into deploying a fully managed database as a service, additional security, and name resolution, and a lot of other components, but we're fully integrated there and have a lot of joint customers to this point.
Yeah, and we've seen that as well, and another kudos to Couchbase for that Capella offering, because I think it really just takes it to the next level in terms of accessibility for organizations. Great move.
Fantastic. So looks like we have another question. Does Erwin Data Modeler allow and support denormalization?
Absolutely.
From a relational model to sure.
Yeah, let me take this one. Yeah, we actually have what we refer to as guided denormalization and normalization. So it depends on the model that you choose. Right. So in a relational model, if you have a relational to relational, you can even denormalize those relational structures using the data model. But when we're talking about, a relational logical model to, say, a JSON physical model, we absolutely have that ability and guide you through the denormalization process to bring it down to do a lot of the things that David illustrated there with embedding and all of those things. And it actually will guide you through with why you might want to do this or what might spur you to want to do that. So it actually helps you build those skills around denormalization, and you can bring it to full denormalization or any level in between. Because you can do it by the model, or you can do it by the different collection or document that you may have in that model.
Yeah, and I would like to add, as you've seen before, now that we've added scopes and collections into our product, you can do a one-to-one mapping from your relational model over to Couchbase. That might be for very heavily relational users, and that's a good starting point for them. But once you start asking questions of your data, then that tends to lead to a lot more denormalization and combining multiple tables into single documents.
I used to get screamed at by my DBA for these multi-join complex queries that would just take the engine down to its knees, and it was never a good conversation. It's just amazing what you guys have done in terms of simplifying that for performance.
But your query was beautiful and should
it
have been applauded. It just trained the system. Yes, gotcha.
It was a piece of art, but an art best for the wall, not for the not for the database engine.
Okay, so thanks for that answer, and I think we have one more. All right, the question is, do I need a different version of Erwin Data Modeler for different database platforms?
Ooh, that's a good question. No, you do not. When you purchase a Erwin Data Modeler seat, it supports, I don't have the exact number, but it's, upwards of 30 different platforms and different versions of those platforms as well. So it's one product that supports all of your legacy databases. It supports Couchbase. If you're in the data warehousing world, all of those new modern cloud databases. So it's one tool for all of your databases. And then there's two flavors of that. One that is a standalone that you can use and you just save your models as files to your local file system, or what we call the Workgroup Edition, which is the one that comes enabled to connect around that centralized modeling repository. But both of those support all of the databases in one tool. And that's why it's so powerful in terms of helping you lift whatever you want to capture from your legacy and move it over to this modern data platform that's at the core of that capability. So yeah, one tool for all of your database platforms.
Fantastic. So I don't have any other questions unless somebody who is watching would like to drop another into the chat. But if not, I think we've covered everything that our viewers might want to know about data democratization and data maturity. So, Danny, David, thank you so much for your time. This was a fantastic webinar. Glad to get this content out there.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. Always love working with you guys. All I see out there is happy customers, and that's always a good thing. So much appreciated.